Hello from Cluj as well. I'm Mirela and I will be co-hosting with Elvis this meeting. It's such a privilege to get to interview you, Terrence. You have been a mentor and a friend for our family for a long time, and my husband and I admire you very much. So thank you for allowing us all to learn from your experience.
Oh, thank you. I'm very honored to hear that. Thank you.
You have been in leadership development for 27 years now. Can you tell us a little bit about your career journey? How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I found the role or the role found me. That's a really good question. I actually started out of university working in a ministry, and I was working in a ministry with professional and collegiate athletes and coaches. To much what Elvis said before, I was helping them work on the spiritual dimension of their life, just like professionals, athletes are also a dimension. There's the physical dimension, the emotional dimension, and the spiritual dimension. And the spiritual dimension is often overlooked. And after a few years, I felt compelled to go into the marketplace. And I began to think about, how do I take all these great skills that I learned in the ministry, working with top coaches and athletes, and put it into the marketplace? So I discovered that there was this area called corporate training and corporate learning and leadership development. And I found that the skill sets that I gained in my time in the ministry were directly transferable to the marketplace. Different content, sometimes different context, but the skills were the same. So it's been a great fit for me.
Thank you. And you have traveled and trained managers and leaders all over the world. In fact, I know you'll be in Romania very soon again. What has been your experience in training leaders in Europe?
Yeah, my experience training leaders in Europe has been wonderful. I am responsible actually for the instructional aspects of leadership development for Emerson around the world. Our company is a little close to about 90,000 employees in 140 countries. In Europe, we are growing very well right now. Coming out of the pandemic, we're close to 20,000 employees across Europe. Obviously dispersed based on the country. I think we have the most employees in Germany at about 3,500. My last count in Romania was 3,175 employees inside Romania, and about 2,900 of them are in Cluj-Napoca, which I'll be at again in December. I came up with a quick list of some of the cities I've been to. I know many Europeans have seen more of America than most Americans have. I've probably seen more of Europe than most Europeans have. I've done business for Emerson in Prague and in Bar, Switzerland. I'm headed to Aachen soon, London, Budapest, Madrid, of course, Cluj, Zurich. I'm on the phone at least every other day, beginning at 6 in the morning with Nova Mesto. So yeah, quite a bit of experience, and it's been a complete delight for me.
Yeah, so we are so ready to hear from your experience. But before I ask you, Terrence, to share about our topic today, I would remind everyone that you can write your questions in the chat box, because after Terrence's presentation, we will take a few questions from the audience. So back to you, Terrence.
Okay.
When you think about engagement, what do you look for in those you work with?
Yeah, let me start with this here, because this will be really the anchor of our presentation. What do I look for in an employee who's engaged? Well, we know that engaged employees come to work every day with a passion and with a commitment. They go the extra mile for us, not because they have to, but because they want to. They'll run through walls for us. You know, we're not engaged employees. We'll give them minimal effort. Actively disengaged employees might actually sabotage the business. So I'm looking for employees who are committed, not just merely compliant, who go the extra mile. But to have employees who are engaged requires effort on our part. And I'd like to set the frame for our 30 minutes together by looking at this diagram. This is really the foundational diagram that we use for our leadership development at Emerson. And let's actually start with the end in mind. I'll direct your attention to the right-hand side of the screen. I think what you and I, what everybody on this call wants is a healthy, high-performing company. I mean, that's what we want. A healthy, high-performing company, if you move now to the middle, just doesn't happen. It really is based on the type of work climate that employees experience. Now, I'm not saying culture here, I'm saying climate, because climate and culture are not the same thing. I like the word climate because it's such a powerful metaphor. This word organizational climate is based on 70 years of research done by McClellan, who is to organizational psychology to what Freud was for clinical psychology. In other words, every person who's in a management or leadership role creates a climate that their employees experience. And this will be either a favorable climate that drives engagement or a not so favorable climate that would not engage employees or cause them to go the extra mile. Now, working way to the left of the diagram here, it really comes down to this: how you and I show up as leaders every day, how we behave, how we interact with our teams creates a climate that they experience. A positive climate creates a healthy, high-performing organization. A not so positive climate does not create that. So really, we're going to talk today about these first two boxes: how we show up or how we behave as managers and leaders, how we lead and manage our teams, and the type of climate that we create that determines whether employees will be engaged or not engaged or actively disengaged. So when Elvis approached me asking me if I would speak to this, I think there's three things that we'll talk about here on engagement. My favorite preacher is a Scotsman called Alistair Begg. If any of you have ever listened to Alistair before, he has a very predictable cadence in his presentations. And I've kind of adopted that too. Anytime Alistair speaks, he addresses three things. He addresses the what, the so what, and then the now what. So I'm going to follow his lead here. And let's now first talk about the what around employee engagement. And to be able to do that, I'd like to introduce to you the results of Gallup's latest global survey on employee engagement, which measures all three levels of engagement. So this isn't the newest survey they've released, but Gallup's newest survey just came out 2 or 3 months ago, only reports back to us on the level of engagement, but it does not give us any indication at all about what percentage of employees are not engaged or what percentage of employees are actively disengaged. So I'm using as my favorite reference here Gallup's latest research on employee engagement at all three levels. And let's walk through the slide and the definitions then. What their research shows is from a global level, only 15% of employees on a global scale are what we would call engaged employees. We'll go through the definitions in a moment. 67% on a global scale are employees who are not engaged. And 18% of the global workforce, 18% of anyone who pulls down a paycheck is in that category called actively disengaged. Now, let's set some context to address the content here. Let's make sure we go through the definitions as we receive them from Gallup. You'll see here on the screen, I have the definition of an engaged employee. Think of employees in your own experience. You might even think of you as well if you consider yourself engaged. Engaged employees are highly involved and very enthusiastic about their workplace. They're committed to their work and the place they work. So it's not only their job, but also their employer. They have an emotional investment in their work. They're driven internally to be highly productive. These are the people that drive innovation and continuous improvement. They work with a passion. They give discretionary effort. These are the people that move the organization forward. These are the people who committed, like I said before, they go the extra mile for us, not because they have to, but they just want to. That's engaged employees. So about 15% of the global workforce fits that category. The majority of them fall into this category here. 67%, according to the Gallup research, falls into this category of not engaged employees. These are the employees who come to work every day, but they're emotionally unattached, almost robotic at times. They're putting in the time, but no energy or passion or commitment. They're not giving the discretionary effort. These employees might be compliant, but a committed employee gives you extra effort. A compliant employee does it because they have to, not because they want to. They show up to work, they do the minimum required. That's almost 7/10 of the global workforce. Now, let's take a look at almost 20% of the global workforce fits into this category that we'll call actively disengaged employees. The Gallup research is very interesting around this one, gang. Actively disengaged employees are not just unhappy at work. They act out their unhappiness. They are openly resentful every day. And the research shows that every day, these actively disengaged workers work very hard to undermine what their engaged employers accomplish. In other words, they are saboteurs. They are trying to make things really bad. So I'm kind of curious here. This is the result of the global survey. I'm curious to get your initial reactions to the level from global, the percentage of engaged, not engaged, actively disengaged. Are you surprised? Are you shocked? Are you disappointed? Do you agree? Has that been your experience? Could you take a moment, open your chat window, and I'd love for you to type in your response, your reaction to these engagement statistics. Go ahead and open up your chat window right now, and I'll read them as they go. So Bob, it sounds about right to you? Good. Who else has a reaction here? Yeah, this is shocking, isn't it, Yuli? So Rick, this is similar to your experience. Marilla, you're shocked. Yeah, some of you saying, yeah, it's been my experience. Yeah, some people in HR, no surprise, you kind of surprised. Yeah, it's kind of, we see it that way. Good, what else? Take a look at these. Yeah, somewhat surprised. Yeah, so this is really amazing. This is shocking, isn't it? Yeah, I like this one. Alexi, thank you. Innovation is done by only engaged people. No wonder there's so little innovation. Yeah, exactly. Now, I'll facilitate a discussion around this in our Emerson workshops along with my coworkers. What I'd like to do is show you now some things by region, because the statistic I just showed you was globalized. Now let's look localized. Let me call out my pointer here and follow along. And we have here leaders and laggers. A lagger is those who were left behind, those people who are in last place. And I've been able to break down this research by world area. For example, in Eastern Europe, Romania is the leader in Eastern European countries with a percentage of 30% of employees are engaged. Well, congratulations for being in first place, but that's only 3 out of 10 employees. Greece, as far as Eastern Europe goes, is the lagger at 9%. In Western Europe, Iceland is the leader at 22%. Italy is at 5% engaged. If you're going even further into the research, you'd be surprised at the percentage. I think in Italy, it's over 71% not engaged, and then the remainder actively disengaged. So I have them here by world areas for you to look at, to look at who's kind of leading and who's kind of lagging. And there's many explanations for why this might be happening. And I remember when the research around this survey came out, at the time, Germany was at 7% levels of engagement. The Gallup organization actually did a white paper about why that is in why that is in Germany. And their conclusions is because Germany is moving so heavily to a contractor-based workforce versus a full-time employee workforce, that's the reason why their level of engagement now is so low. And if you really think about it, if I'm a contractor, this is a transaction. This is a fee for service. If I'm a contractor, why would I go the extra mile if this is just a transaction? Gallup even went on to say that the fact that engagement now is at that level in Germany is costing them so many billions of euros a year in lost profitability. Now, when we have these discussions at Emerson with our leaders, someone will usually raise their hand and say, okay, so these are the global figures, Terrence, fine. But where is this at Emerson? How is Emerson showing up in this? Well, my response is, well, we don't measure the same factors of engagement that Gallup uses. They use 12 different factors. But I'd like to move from now the what to the so what. So these are levels of engagement. All right, we know whether we're a leader, we know whether we're a lagger, we know from a global perspective, only 15% are engaged, 18% are actively disengaged, 67% are just putting in the time, getting the paycheck. So what? I think the real question here, and I think the value I'm going to bring in our time together is not what I say, but maybe the questions I'll ask. So I think that there's really three questions that bear asking at this point. The first question is, what causes an employee to become or remain engaged? Engagement is fluid. It's not static, it moves. So employees can become engaged, they can remain engaged, or they can move to the other levels. So what do you think causes an employee to become or remain engaged? Another question any leader should be asking him or herself is, what causes employees to become or remain not engaged? And then finally thinking through, what causes employees to become or remain actively disengaged? In my 27 years in my career, I've been a people manager for about 27 in my 27 years, I've been a people manager for about 23. I have yet to have an employee show up on day one and say, I'm here to make things miserable and sabotage everything and to be actively disengaged. In other words, something happened or something did not happen that caused that level of engagement. So I'm going to open this up to the group again, and I'm going to invite you to respond in your chat panel. Let's look at this first question. In your opinion, what do you think causes an employee to become or remain engaged? What causes them to go the extra mile and give commitment, to work with a passion and feel a profound connection to their work and to their employer? What are your thoughts here? Go ahead and type them in. So it could be, I'm given freedom and some autonomy and responsibility. Yeah, Ovi, yeah, certainly the climate that those employees experience. They have ownership, yeah, the culture, and below that, the climate. Good leadership. Yeah, some of it is their makeup, their attitude. When their employer invests in them and they grow. Yeah, the leadership. They feel a connection and proud of their company. They feel like they are known and appreciated. That's very powerful. They have autonomy. That means they're trusted. Yeah, they're praised for what they do. There's a levels of respect. There's mutual respect. These are great. So let me ask you another question here. When you look at the things in this chat panel, the answer to this question, how many of these things that we typed out here are a direct correlation between that employee and their manager? What do you think? How many of the things that you just put here in your chat panel are a direct correlation between the employee and his or her manager? A lot. I love that. Yeah, almost all of them. Yeah. So in other words, sometimes leaders feel like you have to take the hand that's dealt. You have no control or influence whether people will be engaged or not engaged or actively disengaged. And I would argue that you have a lot of influence about somebody's level of engagement because of how we show up, our leadership behavior. Let's take a look at the next one. What do you think causes an employee to become or remain not engaged? Remember, not engaged employees show up, they might be getting the work done, but they're not committed, they are compliant. It might take even more effort to get them merely compliant though. What do you think causes an employee to just go robotic and just put in the time, but no work, no passion, no energy, just I'm here for the paycheck? Somebody said the environment, maybe the routine. Maybe they're not being mentored, a short-term view, they don't feel valued. Maybe it's a micromanager. They don't share the same values as the organization. They're not respected. They want more, but they're not getting it. Maybe they need a stretch assignment and there's too much routine. Yeah, Nolan, thank you. They sense that their work doesn't really make a contribution. They don't see how what they do fits into the bigger picture of things. No support from the manager, no growth opportunities. Yeah, little feedback. Yeah, maybe the only time they get feedback was when they've done something wrong, real or perceived. Now, when you look at this list, I'm going to ask you the same question. When you look at this list, how many of these factors that you just put on that causes employees to become or remain not engaged are a correlation between the employee and their manager? What do you think? Go ahead and type that into your chat window, please. Yeah, the majority, some say 100%, 90%, but that many of these things you just put in response to that question are a direct correlation between that employee and their relationship with their immediate manager. All right, so then let's look at the third one. In your opinion, what causes employees to become or remain actively disengaged? Remember, they're not just unhappy at work, but they're actually acting out. In fact, the Gallup research says something interesting if you read it. It even says that actively disengaged employees lie awake at night thinking about how they're going to make it miserable for other people during the workday. That's where they put their energies. What causes an employee to become or stay actively disengaged and openly hostile? Look at that: lack of trust, specific actions by the company, maybe a conflict, unfairness, a lack of trust, a disrespectful manager, disrespectful environment. Yeah, maybe they feel cheated. Maybe they feel they've been lied to. Maybe they have been lied to. Yeah, it could be the culture of the organization, or I would suggest the climate that they experience from their immediate manager. So these are factors of engagement, the things that cause employees to become or remain engaged or not engaged or actively disengaged. And when you look at this most recent list that you're typing in right now, many of these two, not maybe as a high percentage as the first two, but many of these two are a direct correlation, and it relates to their relationship with their immediate manager. So here, let's sum that up with this here. The research is very, very clear. And Gallup calls this out, that says 70% of the factors that contributes to an employee's level of engagement is explained by the quality of their manager, their team leader, their immediate supervisor. So 70% of the influences of what causes an employee to become or remain engaged, or just to go on automatic pilot and be not engaged, or to go hostile or saboteur, is a direct relationship with their manager. In other words, how the manager shows up. So we've looked at the what and the so what. So now what? I don't want to offer a problem without offering an opportunity as well. So let's look at an opportunity for proven and practical ways that we can improve the level of engagement. And again, keeping in mind, gang, that this is how we show up. The most powerful engagement model I know is summed up into 3 actions here. It's know them, involve them, and grow them. And I've seen time and time again at Emerson in our leadership development programs, how a leader can increase the amount of employee engagement on their team by just spending time doing these 3 things. I'm not going to ask you to do something I'm not trying to do myself. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying. But here are some of the things to get you started, because this may be some of the things that you'll want to reflect on over the next few weeks. I'm going to challenge you from one people manager to another. What can I do to know my employees? What can I do to involve them? And what could I do to grow them? And to the answers to these would be directly correlated to, what causes employees to become or remain engaged. Here might be some things I'll offer you, some things that you could do to begin to increase the level of engagement with your employees. First, know them. Schedule monthly one-on-one meetings with each one of your direct reports. The length of time that you have for these meetings is not as important as the cadence of these. You can have a fantastic, even 10 or 15-minute meeting. They don't have to be a 1-hour non-productive meeting. You can actually have a very efficient and efficacious 15-minute meeting. This is how you get to know them. Spend some time to understand their drivers, their motivators, what gets them excited, what demotivates them. Ask them about their development goals. Use your active listening skills. The value you will gain here in your employees when you know them is not how well you talk, but how well you listen. That's a critical skill that many managers and leaders suffer at. Be a great listener. So this is one way you can increase engagement. Know them. Another thing that you'll do to increase their engagement is involve them. Here are some possible ways that you can do this. These are some ideas that I try to use to involve my team. I'll assign them as project leads for new projects. We have a lot of new initiatives coming out. We are very busy, but as a developmental opportunity, I'm going to trust my employees to take on even some of my tasks. And they're growing and developing, and I'm preparing them for a future role. I'm also pressure testing them in case they take my role when I leave the organization. Another way to involve the employees is have some of your employees train the newer employees, get them involved that way. If you're presenting to upper management, involve them in your presentations to upper management. And of course, have them create goals that are aligned with yours so that you're all moving in the same direction. So we could know them, we could involve them. Another thing we want to do is grow them. And here are some examples in how you could grow them. Provide feedback to your employees, not just constructive feedback in terms of, well, here's where you're going wrong. Provide supportive feedback. Supportive feedback maintains good performance. Constructive feedback modifies underperformance. Again, delegation is both involving and growing them. When we talk about delegation at Emerson, we're talking about delegating for development. In many companies, when they think of delegation, they think of dumping. And dumping is not delegation. Dumping is terrible. But we'll use delegation, delegating one of our tasks, as a developmental tool for our direct reports, or maybe somebody else's direct report. And this is a good way of pressure testing their abilities for future roles. Create training and development plans for the employees as well. Put them on a development trajectory. And then provide stretch assignments or role rotations as well for them. Now, if you think about this, know them, involve them, and grow them. Nothing I put on this list is difficult to do. It's not hard. You don't even need to go to training to do this. It just requires some intentionality to do it. These three actions, to know your employees, involve them, and to grow them, require intentional dialogue. Dialogue is a mutual exchange of information and understanding. One thing that we'll all say, all of our facilitators in our leadership development courses, is this, and please pay close attention. Dialogue is the foundation of trust. Trust is the source or the wellspring, the catalyst for discretionary effort. The reason why many employees are not engaged or they're actively disengaged is there's no trust. But one thing that we know for certain is that dialogue with any employee is a trust accelerant. If you want engaged employees, my challenge to you from one manager to another is first assess, are you going into dialogue with your employees? Are you knowing them? Are you involving them? And are you growing them? So these things are leader behaviors. In other words, know them and grow them and involve them are elements of how you manage and lead. And if you know them, involve them, and grow them, you are creating a positive work climate that will increase the engagement of your team members, which improves not only the local climate for that team, but the organizational culture of the entire group. So again, think about that. How you show up creates a climate that employees experience. That's going to determine where they're going to be at. But as we begin to wrap up and get ready for some Q&A here, we talked about how you manage and lead. So again, content's important, but definitions of content are equally important. So I'd like to begin to wrap up with this. This is something that we convey in all of our leadership development workshops at Emerson. I find at Emerson and the companies I've worked at before or where I've consulted, we tend to use the words managing a team and leading a team interchangeably, but they're not. They're different but complementary skill sets. So when we use the word management, what we're talking about there is how we work with others to achieve our business goals. So managers, people managers, we organize human and financial and material resources into a productive system so that we could achieve our goals. That's what managers do. They organize the work. But leaders are different. Leadership is the process by how we positively influence others in order to gain their commitment to the objectives. And the way that they do that is by creating a vision that inspires people to accomplish something bigger than themselves, to go that extra mile. Now, that said, I want to remind you that they're not the same. They're both important. And for all of you on the call, I would suggest you are a manager and a leader. And the expectation of your employees is that you show up well in both of these areas using different but complementary skill sets. So I'll begin to wind up by asking you a question here. Keeping in mind, and you'll respond in your chat windows here, keeping in mind the definition of management and leadership, what's likely to happen if all you do is manage your employees, but you're not leading them? What's the best that you could expect from your employees if all you're doing is managing them, but you're not leading them? Could you go ahead and type your responses into the chat panel right now? Thank you, Andre. There's a disconnection. Good. What else? What else is likely to happen? Inactivity. I like that. Those who only manage become annoying. They don't add value. You're right. Yeah, I like this, Bob. Thank you. Yeah, if all you do is manage but don't lead, you might be developing followers, but you don't expect to develop leaders. Katerina, you're exactly right. Employees will not be engaged. Zadnik, yeah, they will lose their motivation. Rick, yeah, not engaged. They'll be like robots. Alex, you used exactly the word I was looking for here. If all you do is manage but you don't lead, the best you're going to get from employees is they'll be compliant. They're going to do it because they have to, but not because they want to. But remember this, gang, if you manage and lead, they won't be compliant, they'll be committed. And what does a committed employee give you that compliant employees can't or won't? The discretionary effort. Again, they'll go the extra mile. They'll run through walls for you. But there's another question here. What's likely to happen if all I'm doing is leading my team, but I'm not managing them? Let's say I'm full of vision, I'm full of inspiration, but I'm not doing the management part. What's likely to happen if all I'm doing is leading, but I'm not managing? Yeah. Vladimir, thank you. There's no order, there's chaos. What else is happening? Yeah, you're losing the purpose of the business. Yeah, you're full of inspiration, but the work's not getting done. And you'll begin to lose employees because nothing's getting accomplished. Sometimes you and I have worked in organizations that are overmanaged and underled. Sometimes we might have been in a situation where we work for a company that's overled and undermanaged. So let's frame this up, gang. You're a manager and a leader. And I would say that management and leadership are two sides of the same coin. One side of a coin is not more valuable than the other. Like it's not more valuable to be a manager or it's not more valuable to be a leader. You're both. It's two sides of the same coin. One side of the coin is not more valuable than the other, but both sides combined create value. So again, as you think about it, how you manage and lead and how you use both those skills, different but complementary. How you get the work done, but how you inspire people to do it, creates that positive work climate that causes employees to become and remain engaged, or move them out of actively engaged or move them out of not engaged. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mirella. I think some questions might have come in, some comments as well. And Mirella is going to facilitate some question and answer. If you do have some questions, go ahead and send them over to her in the chat panel as well. Mirella, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Now involve, grow, delegating, not dumping, managing, and leading. I've taken so much from you, Terrence. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
While people are writing in the chat, I will ask you my first question. Since you have worked with managers all over the world, what you have noticed, most of them fail to do that would be most beneficial for their team's engagement?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, especially for those who are newer to the role, like people who are promoted from individual to contributor to manager, they'll often think, well, whatever made me a successful individual contributor, now that I'm promoted into a management or leadership role, I'll keep doing that, but even more. And what that happens is they end up becoming super workers instead of supervisors. Whatever skills made you as successful in your last role are not the skills that you need to be successful in your new role. And many of them struggle in quitting their old job and they have to take on new jobs. And what's new is maybe in your old job, you were responsible for getting the work done by yourself. Now, in a management leadership role, you're responsible for getting the work done through others. I do a lot of work with Michael Watkins. He used to be on the faculty of Harvard Business School. He's now at the International School of Management Development in Lausanne. He's the professor of organizational leadership. His research shows that the toughest transition anyone will ever make in their career is not from president to CEO, but from individual contributor to first-time supervisor. That is the toughest transition of them all.
Thank you. Another question is, would you elaborate more on the difference between dumping and delegating?
Yeah, dumping might be where I'm going to leave my office for a minute and I have a big list of tasks. I'm going to knock on Alejandro's door next door and say, Alejandro, I need you to get this done. That's more of an assignment. But if you think about it, delegation is when I give somebody one of my tasks to perform. I remain accountable for the results, but I'm going to be using that delegation as a developmental tool. I always like to go to word origins, and when you think of the word delegation, the root word is delegate. What's a delegate? A delegate is someone who acts on your behalf. They have the empowerment, they have the responsibility. So if you're delegating for development, you're trusting that employee, you're involving them, you're growing them, you're pressure testing them. It's a developmental tool, not just a dumping tool. I hope that's a helpful response.
Yes, yes. Another question is, how do you motivate your manager into becoming the leader you need in order to grow and engage or stay engaged?
So does that mean, how do you manage up? Let's say I'm where I need to be, but my manager isn't. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really around influence, and sometimes we need to manage up and sometimes we need to perform well, excuse me, in order to raise the bar for our manager. I will often say this in our leadership workshops. We're teaching them very important skills. Many times a hand will come up and say, shouldn't my manager be attending this too? I'll say, well, of course they should, but don't imply that they necessarily are skilled or willed in these areas. Just a bit of research around this too. When we talked about employee engagement, the Gallup organization did a research about the level of manager engagement just in the States. And their white paper said 50% of people managers in the States are not engaged. Now, I would say that that's infectious. And if my manager is not engaged, why would I give them discretionary effort? I think I would catch it from them. So again, as you think about how you show up as a manager and a leader, if you're showing up to work and you're not engaged or you're actively disengaged, don't expect your employees to give discretionary effort.
Okay. Thank you. Another question is how to lead the people who have different opinion than you.
Yeah, I think that's where listening skills come in, are very important. What I've found over the years is people don't mind if they're not agreed with, but they do mind if they know they're not being listened to. And I think one of the most critical skills for any manager or leader is the ability to listen to others. So practice the active listening skills. And again, when we have that exercise about what causes employees to become or remain not engaged or actively disengaged, one answer I will always see on the flip chart is, my boss never listens to me. Well, let's improve our listening skills. It doesn't mean that we agree, but we listen better and employees will become more engaged. I can guarantee it.
Do you have like final thoughts for us, Terrence?
Yeah, none of this is easy. None of this is easy, right? I mean, to manage and lead. A lot of times though, as managers and leaders, we have no problem telling our employees what we expect from them. But I think a great manager and leader takes time to really understand the expectations that their team has for them too. I would encourage you all on the call sometime to have that meeting with your team and say, what do you expect from me? And this is a good way, again, of having dialogue. Some managers are absolutely afraid to have that conversation because they don't want to know what their team expects of them, or they have no interest in knowing that. But again, I'll sum it up with this, Marella. Dialogue is the foundation of trust. Trust is the source of discretionary effort. You want employees to become engaged and to become not engaged and to become not to increase their levels of engagement, begin to engage in intentional dialogue with them and listen intently.
Thank you so much, Terrence. We gained so much from your experience. If some of you want to connect with Terrence, you have on the screen the information for that. And I wish we had more time for other questions, but we really like to have some time for small groups as well. So Elvis, can you help us further with information about this?
Yeah, actually, I have two more burning questions, and since we have about 5 more minutes, yeah, I'm gonna ask them if I may. So one question that I'm very curious about is, what do you do with the actively disengaged employee?
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of reasons why they could be actively disengaged. That's the one that might not have as much correlation between their manager and their boss. My family's from Ireland, and we have an expression that say, some people are never happy unless they're unhappy, right? So they're inherently miserable, right? And we know from the research too that 73% of those who are actively disengaged are also actively looking for work elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Maybe here's a way of looking at it. The people who are engaged, they have a fire inside of them. The people who are not engaged, I think we need to light the fire in them. And sometimes we need to kind of put the fire under them. You know, it's a little part of the gut and a little part of the butt, if you know what I mean. And then I think the people who are actively disengaged, those are the ones who just may need to be fired. You know, because you're not doing them any favors, or the organization favors by keeping them there, unless there is something that you can do to improve your leadership behavior that changes the climate. And I can tell you, Elvis, with great certainty that, you know, in the feedback we're getting from our leadership courses, when our employees, when our managers apply this, know them, involve them, and grow them, we have relevant, credible, compelling data that we've been able to take some employees who are actively disengaged and now they are engaged and committed. Just because of a few simple things like know them, involve them, and grow them.
Great, great. Is there a way, Terrence, to kind of anticipate a potential actively disengaged employee? I know you said that it's a result of leadership and management, but is it connected ever with just the attitude of people being, you know, trying or liking to be miserable? And can we anticipate maybe in the interview phase?
Yeah. Great question. I think one of the reasons why Gallup did not report in their last survey about levels of not engaged and actively disengaged, it's because what was going on in the pandemic. But the indicators are right now, more and more employees are becoming not engaged because they don't feel the emotional connection at work like they did before. Now, I think collectively, the world is experiencing levels of grief. You know, if you read the McKinsey report on the mindset of grief, it's really, really interesting. And the amount of disconnection in a connected environment is amazing. So, and again, if I feel emotionally disconnected, I don't feel invested, and it's more likely that I'm going to look elsewhere.
Great. That's extremely important. I'm curious, Terrence, since we're about personal, professional, spiritual development.
Yes.
Where do you see the connection between engagement and the spiritual development? Where do you see the connection between engagement and our values, our convictions, our faith, even?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. That's a very valuable question to me, and I think a lot of other people on the call. Again, putting back to this slide here, how I show up at work. If I'm being true to my faith, if I'm walking the talk, if I'm walking in a manner worthy of my own faith, if I'm being consistent to the values in the spiritual dimension of my life, that will influence how I manage and lead. You know, and again, how I manage and lead is going to create a climate. If I'm being inconsistent, if I'm not operating from a set of essential values, nobody finds that out faster than my team. There's no reason for them to be committed. But if I'm consistent, I'm also inspiring them. And if I'm inspiring them, part of my faith might be caught too, right? But here's my opportunity is to live out my faith in the marketplace. And the way that I'm doing that is how I manage and lead and the type of influence I can have in a company of 90,000 employees.
Great. So applying this know them, involve them, grow them in the next 2 weeks, what would be your advice, your most immediate advice to us? What should we do next week? You know,
if you were to sit down, each one of you, in fact, here's what I would recommend. Each one of you take 15 minutes in the next week to think and write down, what are 5 things I can do to know my employees, 5 things I can do to involve them, 5 things I could do to grow them. You'd be able to identify within that list of 15 actions, 5 for each category, some low-hanging fruit.
Great.
None of the things that you would put on your list are difficult or require training or special skill. It just, you got to want to do it. It requires intentionality, but again, dialogue is going to be key to doing all those. None of them are hard.
Great.
But here's one last thought I'll leave. This know them, involve them, and grow them. These are not suggestions anymore. These are actually expectations that our employees have of us.
Mm.
So
Great.
going forward, that these are expectations that we need to live up to in our employees' eyes.
No pressure, huh?
No pressure at all.
Thank you, Terrence.
My
It has been amazing.